welcome to episode 5 of the Chetori podcast. I'm Nader.
And I'm Shayan.
And we're really excited to have another episode ready for all of you. As always, we wanted to thank everyone for their great support and responses that they've given to us. We started this podcast to be a genuine voice of young Iranian people. We particularly are aiming this for Iranians that maybe don't speak Farsi that well, or don't read and write it, haven't been there for a while, they're second generation, or just people who are non-Iranian but they're interested in Iran. We want to have a narrative that is neither IRIB nor Iran International, neither Fars News nor Fox News, but just looking at what's actually happening and what's our honest opinion of it. To start off today's episode, we're going to talk about an incident that happened a couple weeks ago, January 20th, that in previous episodes, we were kind of focusing on introducing our show and talking about other events, but we thought it was time to talk about. This was the first International Congress for Women of Influence.
In late January, Iran held an international congress called Women of Influence, which apparently was a response to the all-out pressures after the Women Life Freedom protests. This Congress for Women of Influence was held in Tehran on Friday, with the participation of female guests sent by Iran's limited list of friendly governments.
I mean, there was what, like 20 something. There was people from, what were some of the countries?
So basically these women were mostly wives of heads of state, and some of these heads of states were Burkina Faso, Kyrgyzstan, Serbia, Guinea, Niger, Nigeria, Sri Lanka, Syria, Turkmenistan, and Armenia.
It's interesting because they're not all Muslims either.
Yeah, and they were hosted by Ebrahim Raisi.
His wife.
Yeah, his wife. Ebrahim Raisi is the president of Iran. So his wife, Jamila Alam al-Khuda, basically hosted this event. There was also notable presence of Hassan Nasrallah's daughter, Zainab Nasrallah. And she was also there. So it was a kind of a mix of different women from all types of backgrounds.
And those are the foreign guests. And then on the Iranian part, they got a bunch of CEOs that were female CEOs and entrepreneurs and scientists. And I think the official line, like you said, is that we are going to celebrate Iranian women, and just women in general.
Yeah.
And it seemed what was interesting was the timing, because this is right after
the protests.
These protests happened.
Right. And so I think the goal of this Congress was to showcase achievements, mostly Iranian women, the achievements of Iranian women. And some of the topics that they talked about, I'm looking at this article right here, were they talk about decadent Western culture. So that was one of the topics. Another of the topics that they talked about were plans to empower women. Basically also the experiences of those women who were present in Iran and what they saw for themselves while being in Iran.
So we were just talking before we started recording this episode, we were looking at some of the pictures of that conference. And for example, if you look at I'm no one to judge the way that the woman dresses or say a hijab is good or bad. But if you look at the hijab of the Serbian First Lady, or of the Armenian First Lady, or a number of these other women that are there, and compare how much it covers their hair to, let's say, Mahsa Amini, there's no comparison. Mahsa Amini was much more covered than these ladies of influence were.
Yeah, if you go on Google and you just, Google Congress of Influential Women and then put Iran right next to it, you'll see pictures of all the females who were present at this Congress, and you can see for yourselves how they were dressed. A few of these guests were from Muslim countries, like Syria, like Lebanon, like Turkmenistan. And just go look for yourself. Even Burkina Faso, which I believe is also an Islamic country. I'm not sure.
But, it's a Islamic country.
So you see how these women are dressed. A lot of them are wearing very tight clothes and tight dresses, and have most of their hair sticking out. It looks like a lot of these people, especially the Muslim ladies, they're not really that religious themselves.
Even if they're not religious, whether they are religious or not, they're not practicing their religion.
Choose to wear it that way.
In the same way the Iranian government is saying.
They're free to choose to wear it like how they want to wear it.
And the whole thing is, to me, it's the hypocrisy. I think in an ideal world, why can't everyone wear their hijabs or not wear their hijabs, just like the woman in this conference? Why is it that when it's foreign women, we're very
suddenly
tolerant?
okay.
Yeah, it's suddenly okay. We tolerate it. But when it's Iranian women doing the same thing, suddenly it becomes a problem. And oh no, it's not possible. It's not okay. Why is there the double standard over here? If something is okay for Iranians, it should be okay for them too, or the opposite way around.
Yeah, and also Ibrahim Raisi himself, when this event was taking place, he actually made a statement saying that many women whose only crime is demanding their rights are killed by the police in the United States and in Britain, as apparent in statistics published by the media of these countries. In the Islamic Republic, while we have no doubt that women and men are created differently, they are equal in their humanity. There is no difference in women and men when it comes to reaching the peaks of humanity, and whoever struggles more will reach the heights of morality, spirituality, and humanity.
So this is like a common thing that Iranian government figures will say, Iranian state media will say that, look, women and men are different, but we believe that they both have equal potential, and they can, they give this very high esoteric, theoretical argument. There's an entrepreneur that was like some CEO of some startup in Iran, and she was talking about some of her difficulties, and she was actually saying when she first went to get a loan for a company, right, like she had some idea and stuff, and the bank actually told her, where's your husband or your dad? And it's difficult for them to believe that she was the CEO. And it's just stuff like that. I mean, I think it goes beyond governments. I just think that as Iranians culturally, this issue is still there. But going back to this conference, Abbas Abdi, he's a reformist. He's a reformist. He used to be a politician. Now he's a journalist. There's a lot of things about his past some people don't like, but we're not here to discuss him. He wrote an article in the reformist newspaper Etemad.
Yeah.
He was talking about this article, and one of the interesting things that he pointed out was that, if you look at, for example, the guests from Lebanon, there was a couple of social media influencers from Lebanon who don't wear hijab, to put it lightly, in their own home country, right? They dress very freely, and they came here and they put a little cloth on their head, but it was not the Iranian government approved hijab, but they were there.
Yeah, and also Hassan Nasrallah's daughter was there.
Hassan Nasrallah, yeah, and there was a diverse group of people. They were both respected. They were well respected. The Iranian first lady, I mean, that's a big deal, whether we like her or not. She's the first lady of a country.
Right.
She was there. She respected them. She gave them gifts. The Iranian government paid for them to get an all expenses paid for trip to Iran. They probably got tours and stayed in nice hotels. Why is it for them that we recognize that there's this diversity and that's respected, but Iranian women can't have that same diversity? It's not okay from them. They all have to be like one.
Yeah, how come women in Lebanon, whether they wear their hijab or they don't, how come they can coexist with each other? And in Iran, that's not the case. From the from these protests that we see, like how come we can have the same thing in Iran, where you could choose for yourself whether you want to wear the hijab or you don't want to wear the hijab? I mean, you're inviting all these guests from all these countries who their people don't. It's not mandatory for them to wear the hijab. So how come you're inviting all these people from all these countries that have this right, but in our own country, it's not the case? I feel like a lot of these women who they've invited, if they were actually Iranian, they would at some point would have been in jail.
People like show pictures of that social media influencer that came, and they'll make fun of them. And sometimes you might think this is a little bit mean spirited. But yeah, I don't think that person with that lifestyle that goes out with, in Beirut with bikini pictures and does all of that, regardless of their political views, they would find it tough to live in Iran with Iran's laws for an extended period of time of more than a week or two.
Right. I mean, it doesn't make sense at all.
I think people should be free to pick the lifestyle they want. Again, a lot of people who are outside the country and they don't have to have this daily struggle of being told to dress in a certain way they want to dress, to say certain slogans, to post things in online a certain way. They don't have that struggle, and then they have the luxury of saying, well, within a larger worldview, they don't like America or they don't like Israel or someone like that. And they'll say, well, because of anti-imperialism, we'll support the Iranian government. That doesn't allow you to close your eyes to this constant struggle that they're feeling. It turns into a nightmare. It's truly something that might be, for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, for someone, a vacation that they enjoy. If that's their 24/7, I don't think they're going to enjoy it much too.
No.
Anything else you want to add?
Yeah. So apparently, in this Congress, a Russian journalist also received the Influential Woman Award. And the funny thing is, at the same time, there's a lot of female journalists in Iran who are in prison.
So they ignored all the Iranian journalists, but they give it to some Russian. And Nilufar Hamedi, I think, is still in prison. The person that broke the story of Mahsa Amini.
So funny. An Argentinian one who studied at the Iranian religious Al-Mustafa University for Foreigners was introduced as another influential woman, and I believe she received an award. So I don't know, just very funny.
So you're saying that the way that they chose who is influential and not was also kind of seen as interesting.
Yeah, so, and I'm also seeing here that many foreign students from China and Africa and Latin America who came to study and then returned to their countries and started spreading Iranian Shia teachings in their country. They were also apparently got awards too.
I don't think there's any issue with, again, celebrating people, even seminary students or something else, but it's coming from government funds, number one. And number two, it's really hypocritical.
You should also add the fact that these people who were invited, everything was paid for.
Yeah.
So we're spending our money, Iran is spending this money on all these people who no one really cares about, to be honest, and aren't very influential in ordinary people, in the minds of ordinary Iranian people. So they're getting paid to come here. They go to the best hotels, they're taken care of, and they're given these huge sums of money as prizes or whatever. And it's a facade, pretty much.
Yeah.
But we'd love to hear what you all think about this too. So again, if you go on our Instagram page, Chetori Podcast, feel free to send us a message. And whether you agree with us or disagree with us, we'll share your message or from any other application. Let us know what you think. Moving on from that conference, there was also a pretty big news story that happened February, I'm not sure it's 4th or 5th, but there was a statement from Mirhossein Mousavi, who was Iran's former prime minister, and he was a candidate in the 2009 elections where there was a dispute over the results. He's been under house arrest for a little bit over a decade. It's a very interesting statement where he basically comes and says that in 2009, his slogan as a candidate was to return to a full implementation of the Iranian constitution. However, he says that the events of the past 13 years or so have, and particularly what has happened in the past couple of months, have changed things. Mm-hmm. And he no longer thinks that the current constitution is enough for Iran and Iranians. And so in order to solve that, he calls for a referendum to happen. And basically kind of like a constitutional congress to be formed of founding the Iran. I can't find the Farsi word, but it's founding fathers and founding mothers, I guess, even though that sounds kind of weird. Like basically like influential people to come and draft a new constitution and then for a referendum to take place. This is a pretty big deal because Mousavi, even though he was in prison for disputing the election results in 2009, and he did speak up against the supreme leader, he hadn't gone outside of the constitution. He's gradually been getting more and more radical. A couple of years back, he came out with a statement, and he said that the Alban 98 protests were similar to the Meydan Jaleh massacre that happened under the Shah, and he directly compared the Shah to the supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei to the Shah.
Wow.
Which, again, for someone that's inside Iran and was, the leader of the reformist movement, that's a pretty big statement. And he, earlier this year, or this Iranian year, the previous Western year, 2022, he came out with a statement and he was expressing concern because he said that the supreme leader's son, Mojtaba, is being groomed to be the next supreme leader, and he talked against that. And now he came out with a statement essentially against the entire constitution, and he's essentially calling for regime change. Yeah. That's a really big deal. A lot of people online, some of them don't like Mousavi, and they're like, your opinion doesn't matter, you're irrelevant. They criticized him because he was the prime minister. And during the time he was the prime minister, a lot of events happened that they criticized him for. There was a lot of opposition people that were arrested.
And it's not only him, right? It's Ahmadinejad too, right? He made some.
Yeah, the funny thing is, this is actually an interesting thing that Shine's pointing out. In the 2009 elections, there was this huge divide in Iran of Ahmadinejad versus Mousavi.
Yeah.
Now Ahmadinejad is basically against the government too. It's like both sides of that divide right now.
These two ran against each other, and now they're both against the government.
They're both against the government now in slightly different. Ahmadinejad still has a more populist view, but sometimes he speaks out actually, I think, a little bit more radically. Like he pretty directly talks about the supreme leader.
Yeah, there's tons of clips of him on social media talking about the government in Iran and how bad it is and stuff like that. Yeah,
it's funny now. Whatever 2013 to 2009, like
well, he's not in house arrest like Mirhossein.
No, he's on the Supreme. He's on the National Security Council, like one of those shoras.
Yeah,
but that's why I think recently he's been a little bit more quiet than you would be. Although occasionally he'll make a statement, which is like they say in Farsi, ta'ane dare, like he's sort of not so indirectly criticizing them. But for Mousavi, that's a very big deal. A lot of people were criticizing him, but a lot of people were on the other end of the spectrum were saying that, while people outside the country were just making jokes and making slogans with curse words and just doing things that didn't really have an impact. With one letter, Mousavi made a much bigger impact than any of those people did. I think regardless of whether you agree with Mousavi or you don't like him, that's a very big deal because he's someone inside the country. Yeah. If we had to make a list of the top 10 influential political Iranians after the revolution, Mousavi would 100% be one of them.
Yes.
Khatami, I think today he sort of made a statement was a little bit against that. He was saying, former President Khatami, who's also a reformist leader, he was kind of implying that the current constitution is enough. There's a little bit of a debate among reformists. I also think another interesting thing, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, Shayan, was inside the country, the demand that a lot of people against the government seem to be making again and again is this issue of a referendum. And they're saying that there should be a referendum held, whether that's Islamic Republic, yes or no, or some future government, yes or no. Outside the country, when you look at the opposition people, they seem to be making things saying that Sepah should be a terrorist group, they should kick out Iranian diplomats, they should stop nuclear negotiations. Do you feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect between the two groups?
The people within the country, at this point, they want an overhaul of the regime. Mm-hmm. So they want to get rid of the government. And establish a democratic government. That's the feeling that I'm getting.
Okay.
And the people outside of Iran, I feel like they also have a similar thought as well. I think that right now they're trying to basically push the Western governments to kick out Islamic Republic officials and embassy workers from their country, and to designate IRGC as a terrorist entity, which is already happening, in a lot of.
Well, the U.S. argued that, but why doesn't Mousavi come out and join this campaign to designate the IRGC as a terrorist organization?
Well, maybe he has made a comment. I'm not really sure, but
don't you think that, and maybe this is revealing my biases though, that isn't seen as productive inside here, that asking foreign countries to do things like that, to break off negotiations with Iranian diplomats, to call parts of the Iranian defense forces, whether good or bad as terrorists, that's not seen as the priority. That's kind of just the people outside the country. And the people inside the country, they're saying, no, that's not what we care about.
I feel like the people inside the country are asking that too, though. If you look at social media especially, you'll see people are happy about that the fact that people are like Western governments are designating the IRGC as a terrorist entity because they themselves are being persecuted by this entity in Iran. A lot of the security forces are Sepahi. They're from the Sepah themselves. So the Sepah is the security apparatus in Iran that is controlling the population pretty much.
Isn't that dangerous that you're making a part of the security apparatus? Because it's like, okay, the stuff that Sepah does, right?
Well, there's Sepah, right? There's Sepah, which this whole point is to safeguard the Islamic Republic.
Yeah, it's protecting the government.
Their whole job is to protect the government against internal and external forces, right?
If they're terrorists, wouldn't, like, to me, the SEPA is a terrorist organization the same way the CIA is a terrorist organization, the same way MI6 is a terrorist organization, the same way Mossad. Like, sure, every foreign government represses people internally and assassinates its own opponents. It's not unique what they do. I'm not justifying it. I don't like it.
Yeah.
But if you're going to call them, to me, calling someone a terrorist, that means that we're going to put you on this international blacklist of bad guys like North Korea, and that's a means to isolate you. To me, Iran right now, more isolation, I'm not sure if that's what it needs. If anything, more integration with the rest of the world would help. The people that want more isolation in Iran are not the good people.
Yeah, that's not a bad perspective to have, because if you integrate Iran into the outside world, I feel like they're going to be forced to make some changes themselves.
Let's say that Iran currently was not isolated in the way that it is, and the JCPOA negotiations somehow turned out so they made a new deal, and Iran was suddenly doing a lot of business and selling oils to Europe, and doing business with Western countries. I don't think then in the Ukrainian war, Iran would be as involved selling drones to Russia that the way that it is as pro-Russia as it is right now. I think if Iran was doing a lot of trade with Europe and selling oil to them, it would have a little bit more to lose and would be more cautious. But because it's already been sanctioned to death by all these Western countries, what do they have to lose?
Yeah, it's
like, okay, you guys didn't help us.
We need to make money still. We need to start, we need to have some type of revenue still coming in. I mean, why not sell weapons to Russia?
Yeah, so anyway, the larger point being greater isolation of the Iranian government. While it's very tempting to say, well, there's nothing we can do. Okay, well, then let's just kick out this ambassador. Let's close this office. Masih Alinejad, now her new thing is, she's like, why is there an Iranian interest section in DC? They should close that down. Okay, you can do that, and it might make them feel good. But what is the purpose of doing that?
How is that going to help Iranians living in America?
Yeah, first of all, if they want the passport,
if you want
to go to their dad's funeral or something.
How are you helping us, Iranians who are living in America, if you close down that, what's it called?
The interest section, whatever it is.
I'm going to have to jump through like 10 different more loops now to be able to do whatever I need to do for my documentation. Thanks, Messi.
Let's say, sure, their argument seems to be that if you want the Iranian government to get overthrown, we have to do these things, and we have to completely diplomatically isolate them. But what if the Iranian government doesn't fall? And what if it continues a year from now, and 5 years from now, and 10 years from now? Then just everyone is just, I'm sorry to say, screwed over and suffering, and sanctions just continue and get worse and worse and worse, and an entire generation of Iranians lose their jobs and in a horrible situation. And the government in Cuba has been under sanctions for 50 years? Yeah. They're still there.
Is Masih trying to start another Iraq situation where prior to the war, there was heavy sanctions on the country, and as a result, hundreds of thousands of Iraqi children were killed, died as a result of sanctions? Is that your goal, Masih? Is that what you're trying to do? Because I don't think that's very...
Yeah, and let's not pick on specifically that one person.
I don't think that's going to be helpful for the average Iranian that you're trying to liberate from the Islamic Republic. I don't think that's going to work out.
I think ultimately, to me, it shows that you're right. There's people inside the country that actually, they do support putting IRGC on a terrorist list, and maybe they do support more sanctions. And it's not that they don't exist. There are people inside the country that support that. But there's people that also don't. And at least my opinion is that greater isolation is not a good thing. And if anything, more integration is good. And no, that's not only going to make the Islamic Republic more rich and make them oppress people more. Also, people inside the country. If you talk to anyone that's trying to do business, that's trying to start their own company, that wants to do anything, sanctions make it really, really tough for them to do work.
Yeah.
Big companies actually don't have an issue. The IRGC's companies don't have an issue because they have the resources and the connections necessary to get around those sanctions.
Yeah, don't they control a huge percentage of the economy or something?
Yeah, and they control the ports, and all that does is to get rid of it. It's not all it does. It hurts them too, but it hurts their rivals more. And just mass sanctioning and just cutting off Iran and making this economic blockade of Iran, can the people that support that prove that it's going to overthrow the Iranian government in a certain amount of years? How long of isolation is enough for them? Is it worth it if it's 5 years of pain for the Iranian people, if it's 10 years, if it's 20 years, if it's 50 years, at one point do you say that causing all this suffering is not worth it? It's not going to make a difference. I think it's an open question.
Yeah, I think, but from the Western perspective, they don't really care, because they've already done this to so many countries in the past. They've already done it to Iraq. They've already done it to Cuba. Like, I don't think they really care too much about the average citizen of those countries.
Yeah, the Westerners don't care, but us as
they're not the
Iranians
ones who are suffering. It's the Iranian or the Cuban or the Iraqi at that time who was suffering. So they've done in the past, so why not continue this type of behavior?
But in any case, it is interesting. Mousavi's statement is part of a trend of him. He's getting gradually more and more radical, and he's not the only one. And there's a lot of reformists and former people that were involved in the Iranian government, whether him, whether Ahmadinejad, whether others, who they're becoming more and more extreme and they're becoming more and more radical in their demands and kind of moving past the current government. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the future.
Yeah.
In any case, as always, we'd love to hear your opinions, your takes. If you think you disagree with one of us, or both of us, or think we should, take something else into consideration, please let us know. We'll share your opinion on our Instagram page and in our next episode. Please continue to support us. Please continue to give us 5-star ratings, to share our page with your friends. We'd love it if you would join us next time. And until then, I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.